Hello and welcome to Culture in Between, a podcast all about exploring the unique experiences of people who grew up in a culture outside of their parents' culture. We are your hosts, Alyssa and Brianna, and in today's episode, we are interviewing Keshan, whose parents are from Guyana. Thank you, Keshan, for joining us. We're really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, I don't think I need much more of an intro. I used to live in New York for a very long time, which is the mecca of Guyanese people, so I could tell you all about it.
Nice. And are both your parents from Guyana? Actually, I meant to ask you that before.
Yeah, they both
Okay.
are.
Awesome.
Yeah. And can you tell us where exactly in Guyana your parents are from?
Yeah, my dad is from Bath Settlement, and my mom is from Georgetown.
And like you said, you grew up in New York. So what part of New York did you grow up in? I believe the Guyanese Mecca is in like Queens or something like that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's exactly it. There's a whole playbook that Guyanese people have to get to the United States. And it starts with first getting sponsored by someone who already made it. Then you get a job at the MTA in New York City, which is just the buses and trains and things like that. And then you have your family members co-sign to get a house, and boom, now you're in New York. For some reason, they all chose Queens. I don't know why, but there's so many Guyanese people in New York that they renamed the area from Richmond Hill to Little Guyana. So like they actually have a county in New York that's named after Guyanese people. So there's a lot of them there. That's where I grew up.
Wow,
Nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have a friend who's also Guyanese who their family moved there. They were living in Miami first, and then they moved there. So yeah, and then later I found out that that part of Queens is like Little Guyana. Yeah. So now I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was really fun growing up because when we would go to different events, even if it was random people, there would always be somebody who's like, "Oh, I know you from down the block back in Georgetown." And then there would be those weird connections and you just bump into them on the street because there's so many of them.
That's so great. Yeah, we have a somewhat similar situation in terms of there are a lot of Jamaican people in Miami, and like how you were describing the pathway to coming to the US, everyone in my family was like sponsored to get here. And so yeah, I've heard all about that. So
Or
that
knew
sounds
somebody
very
that was
familiar.
like lived here already, basically.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, about growing up in Little Guyana and being surrounded by Guyanese culture? Like, what was that like, and how has that kind of carried you through, like, to feeling really connected to your culture?
Yeah, it didn't feel strange growing up, but after I left New York and entered the business world and moved to different states, then I started realizing how hilariously strange it was. But growing up, in New York, you just go to the public school that's in your zip code. So people would play all these address shenanigans to try to get people into the best public school. But the one that I went to was the vast majority of folks were Guyanese, Trinidadian, Dominican, all the native immigrants of Queens. So it was actually very rare for me to find somebody who wasn't a first generation or parents were first generation or anything else. Everybody was completely fresh off the boat, if you want to use that term. And growing up, it didn't feel odd because it just felt like kids in high school, kids in middle school. There's the drama, people are dating each other, all the things like that. But when I actually left and went to other places, probably the biggest thing that's different is there are less parties. Like one thing that people like to do is just have like a backyard party where there might be the friend of the week would just throw a party and it's just drinks and food in the back and you'd show up to their house because we all lived in the same area and that's how the community stayed connected. I remember going to so many family events, cousin events, because like everybody somehow is related in some way. So within the community itself, it was just showing up to places, people's houses and connecting with people. And that over time has reduced. I don't know why it did, but growing up, it was a lot more common than it was now. And then, as soon as you leave Little Guyana, all that goes away.
Yeah. I feel like he has you have probably a similar experience to Brandon and me in that, like, growing up in Miami, we did have a big Caribbean population and Hispanic population. We were kind of spoiled in that way a little bit. Yeah, you can go get Jamaican food down the road here, or whatever you want, which is kind of nice, I feel like, growing up.
I think a funny thing, when my wife and I first started dating, we had played this game on our first date where she goes, "Hey, I bet you can't guess what my ethnicity is." And she was obviously Vietnamese. And I was like, "Oh yeah, you're Vietnamese." And she's like, "Huh, what? I can't believe it. You guessed it." And then I went, "Okay, what is my ethnicity?" And she guessed every single country except for Guyana. Because like it's such a rare place to see. It's a tiny little country in South America. When I told her I was Guyanese, she was like, "I have never met another soul or even heard of anybody who ever came from there. And you don't look Guyanese." I'm like, "I know what you're thinking. I look Indian, but there are Indians in Guyana.
That's kind of brings us along to like one of our questions that we typically ask, which is like, what are typical answers that you get when you have people guess or like, or what do they say?
Sri Lankan, Pakistani, Indian, like so the ones that are all like light skinned brown guy, like those I get. But it really depends on the person. So if I'm in the city, one thing that would happen to me a ton, this is when my hair is longer, I might have like facial hair or something. I would have Hispanic grandmas come up to me and ask me for directions in Spanish. And I went through 7 years of Spanish and never learned a single word. So I would say like, hey, sorry, no habla español. And they would give me the dirtiest look ever. They're like, how dare you not learn your mother tongue? And they just assumed that I was Hispanic. So it depends.
Yeah.
Like if you're a Guyanese person, you immediately see me and go like, oh yeah, he's Guyanese. If you're Indian, you assume that I may be some kind of Indian. If you're Hispanic, sometimes they assume that I'm Hispanic, but it really depends on who you are.
I mean, I personally get the Hispanic thing all the time ever since I moved away from Miami. Because in Miami, no one really thought that because, to be honest, most of the Hispanic people in Miami are like white Hispanics. So no one really assumed I was Hispanic. But outside of Miami, yeah, people just talk to me in Spanish. They're just like, oh, yeah, you're Hispanic.
They just assume.
Yeah. And I'm like, no.
Like if you think of the odds, like if you see someone standing there, what is the odds of them being Jamaican or Guyanese?
Yeah.
Like, what's the chance? So you just make the assumption, oh yeah, I can ask them for directions.
And does it like bother you when people guess incorrectly or maybe?
Oh no, I find it very amusing. I find it very amusing because my entire life growing up, I never really knew how to categorize myself. So when you're going through elementary school, middle school, you get the little standardized test and it says, which ethnicity are you? This, or this. And none of them were me. And sometimes I would just guess because also my parents never sat me down and explained like, oh yeah, like this is where you're from. These are the other people. So sometimes I would guess Pacific Islander, like the Pacific Ocean, maybe. Like Hispanic, I guess like my grandfather came from Portugal. Like there's like random things that I would just select and there was no category for me. So whenever I would ask people, I'm like, oh, like you get to feel a little bit of like, what are you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're hitting like all our wonderful questions, which is great. Cause like that is another question we have is like, when you take those standardized tests and things is like, for us, it's like, okay, specifically it would be like Caribbean American, I suppose. But that's never. It's either like, white,
there's no
black,
way. There's like
so it's like
people in the Caribbean. Like,
so it's always like, what do you check? That's something we've asked guests a lot is like, what do you feel like checking? Sometimes it kind of depends on the day.
I choose whatever I feel like, essentially. But now I pretty much check the other category if that's ever available. And if anybody asks me what I am, I just say I'm a West Indian. And that usually clears it up. They hear Indian and they're like, West, somewhere in America? Okay, cool.
Oh my gosh.
That is funny. Yes, I love it. He's hitting all our points, which is, it's because a lot of, because, sorry, Rika, I hope I can jump into this one now. But like, so Brianna and me are like, we have been so interested in actually having this interview because when I hear Guyanese people talk, they have kind of that accent similar to like a Caribbean accent, you would think. Right. But geographically, they're located in South America. So tell me, are you able to tell us a little bit about how that kind of happens and what do you guys feel closer to Caribbean? Like, I don't know. I've just always been curious.
Oh, we definitely feel Caribbean. Like 100% top to down. The culture is Caribbean. Everybody has the crazy accent that sounds hilarious. I can't do one because I lost mine years ago. Because like the New York City school system really drills in like, you got to speak properly. So I lost that eventually. But I don't know why they have that accent. I think it's just something to do with the place that they are. There are so many cultures that exist there. There are Asian people there. There are Indians like myself. There are African Americans. All different Hispanics are there. But they all speak English. So they all have this same tongue that they use to communicate with each other. Guyana was a British colony. So like that's what you learn in school there. Okay. And I think just mixing all those cultures together, you get the Caribbean accent, or at least the Guyanese accent, which sounds the same, but is distinct from Jamaican, is also distinct from Trinidadian. How people ended up in Guyana, the full history is not completely clear to me. I know that the Indians ended up there when the British had it as a colony. They brought them over as indentured servants. I know the Africans ended up there as slaves. The Hispanics, I don't know. They might have came from Brazil. A lot of them came from different other colonies in the area. But I think people just ended up there because there's not a lot of people. You can kind of disappear if you want to. Guyana is the place where Jim Jones was, where you hear like Jonestown, where everyone drank the Kool-Aid. That's where that happened because it's in the middle of nowhere. Whenever you hear of uncontacted tribes or people eating cassava in the forest, it's in Guyana. Like there are towns and stuff, but there's also forests. So you kind of just go there to disappear.
Yeah, it seems like Guyana has a very similar colonial history to like most
Yeah.
British Caribbean islands that were colonized by the British. So yeah, similar with Jamaica. Like a lot of the Indian Jamaicans pretty much came over as indentured servants, and our background is Jamaican Chinese. I don't know if Alyssa told you about that, but
Oh, I didn't know
yeah.
that.
So our mom's side of the family is part Chinese, and the Chinese people came as indentured servants as well. So yeah.
And that's not surprising to me. Like, it makes sense because there are so many Asian people in the Caribbean, and I'm like, oh yeah, they're just part of the culture. So if people end up mixing, it's like, yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I can tell from your reaction that when you hear Chinese Jamaican, you don't even bat an eye. But like when I tell people that, sometimes they're like, really? Like, they have kind of this idea, I think, of what Caribbeans look like, and that
I
they don't
don't know
realize
what that idea is though, right? Because I'm so in tune with the different kinds of countries and
Right.
people that exist in the Caribbean. So I don't know what like the general sense of a Caribbean person is. Maybe something with Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't know. Like, who knows?
Yeah, so when I hear you tell me all those things about Guyana, like I'm like, oh, I'm not surprised that all the this
Yeah.
it's kind of a hodgepodge of people like that.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
great.
trying to remember what the population is. We could probably Google it, but I think it's less than 1 million. And there are at least 100,000 people in just New York, and the other hubs are Orlando and Toronto. So the joke is there are more people outside of Guyana who are Guyanese than in Guyana itself. Like, the goal of being there is to leave Guyana. So that's a big thing.
Yeah. I try to do some research on every country before we do these interviews, and yeah, I was quite surprised to hear that it was less than 1 million people there.
So a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're evolving very quick. I think the first time I ever went was when I was really young. It was like in 2003 or 2004. And they didn't really have running water or electricity in all parts of the place. So my grandparents' house that we stayed at, it's literally on stilts. There's a tub on the top of the roof where you get water from. The electricity is a generator that sometimes works. So it was really, really old. Like, the part I hated the most, you have to go to the bathroom in an outhouse. That was ridiculous. That my privilege as an American made me not really, really hate that. But then when I went back recently, I think it was in mid 2010s, 20s, maybe 15, like 2015. It's completely different. There are paved roads, there are houses, there are mansions that you can see. The main town, Georgetown, is actually a city now. There's a lot of growth happening there. I don't know why, but it's a lot better now.
That was actually going to be my next question. I was going to ask you about if you have visited there and like what your experience was like. So like you said, yeah, I mean the lack of running water and all of that, at least when you were younger, when you visited, that's not even as in Jamaica, we thought that it was like, oh, like we had to deal with not having hot water sometimes, and the power would go out randomly, and I thought that was bad. But what you experienced sounds a little bit different there. Can you tell us kind of what your impressions were of Guyana? Like, did you feel a sense of home? Did you feel like you understood your parents better after seeing how they grew up? What was that experience like in that way?
Yeah, I definitely understood my dad better because he would always tell us stories of like, oh, back in my day, cheese was a luxury. Like, he'd have all the crazy dad stories that, oh, we used to walk 1,000,000 miles just to get a drop
Oh
of
my gosh.
medicine. It's like, okay. But when I saw some of the areas that he lived in, I was like, oh, like that's why you guys were so apt to come to the United States, because the difference in quality of life is immense. Like, when my parents brought us to I was born here, but when my parents were in this country, they had one goal, and it's like, go into the New York education system and get a degree, because then you don't have to go back to where we came from. And I didn't understand why that was so bad until I saw it. I'm like, okay, like there's not a lot of opportunity here. Like, if you're going to get educated, the only option you have is to go to Canada or Britain, maybe the United States if you can get in. If you want to join a company, there are no companies. Like, everyone's farmers, or they're sugarcane miners, or you're working for the government or things like that. So if you wanted robust opportunity, you had to leave. So I understood that immediately as soon as I was there, and it was just reinforced the second time I went. At home, I don't know if I felt more at home, because like my home was New York at that time. I was used to living in a concrete jungle. So going into an actual jungle was strange. Like, it was very odd. Like, I didn't know what to expect. The most horrific experience there was dealing with the mosquitoes. So one thing that you must do is you have to sleep under a mosquito net. If you don't, they will take every drop of blood that you have. So one of the nights I had made a mistake, because I'm used to just, you're on a small twin bed, the mosquito net's around you, and I roll around when I sleep. I don't sleep comfy in the heat. So I roll around the whole night, and then I end up bracing my entire side of the body against the mosquito net for the whole night. And they proceeded to pick me apart for hours. And you know, when you get mosquito bites, they swell up as like a little red lump. They're a little itchy. Imagine the whole side of your body being one continuous mosquito bite. They are ruthless. And of course, nobody cared. Like I did it. They pointed at me and they laughed. They go, ha, you didn't realize that you're supposed to stay in the middle. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, am I going to get fevers, flus, blah, blah, blah. Nothing ended up happening, but man, it was painful. But like that's the dealing with the environment was so hard. Extremely humid, extremely rainy, extreme bugs, extreme weather, extreme plants. The best parts about it, though, were the foods. Like, the native Guyanese cuisine is very nice. I grew up eating it, but it's just better there because the culture is developing new things as you speak. So you get to try, like, net new items that you never thought before, but they're familiar because they use the same ingredients, they use the same products. So you're like, wow, I didn't realize you could have this thing, and, like, it's awesome. But the bigger item that's awesome is that because it's in the tropics and because it's a jungle, you can grow extremely exotic fruits. So when I was there, I probably tried 30 or 40 fruits that I've never heard of. And they were all delicious, which was cool.
Things you can't bring back to the U.S. either, right? Because my mom has tried to do that before and got stopped at TSA trying to bring it. So.
My dad now will always 100% of the time get stopped at TSA because he keeps over and over trying to bring fruits, fish, animals, meats, like things that you know you're not supposed to bring. And he's like, no, if you wrap it up in enough garbage bags and duct tape, you'll never know. And then, they know, trust me. But now every time we fly with him, he has to get stopped.
Yeah. Yeah, we made jokes with my mom about that. We're like, yeah, you're on the bad list there because she got, I forget what. She was trying to bring in some kind of apple or something, and they were like, no.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yeah. I get it, though. Like, who knows what crazy bug is inside of that thing that collapses the American economy? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
From that one fruit you brought it. Yeah. I know. Oh, my gosh. That's crazy. So what are some of your favorite, like, foods to eat in Guyana?
Oh, definitely. My favorite dish is a naan bread that we call roti. We actually call it dal puri because it's a naan bread with crushed up. I'm trying to figure out like the terms that people would know. Chickpeas is like crushed up chickpeas and spices, and then another bread, and then you cook those all together, and then you use it to eat pumpkin, and it's like a special kind of pumpkin that's really sweet. You put shrimps in it, and it's just my favorite dish by far. And like the availability of the specific spices and fruits and vegetables in Guyana made that so delicious. Like it was as intended. My mom's really good at recreating it here, but it was just better over there. So that was my favorite. The fruits, man, star apples, cassava pones. Like I can't even remember all of the names, but they come in so many different shapes and sizes. I think my favorite one was pecans, like the nut. If you didn't know, there was a fruit that nut gets attached to, and it's delicious. It's so good. There are pecan tree, not pecans. Yeah, there are pecan trees everywhere, and you can just eat the fruit, and it's awesome.
Sounds good. Healthy too.
Yeah.
Like saying the amount of fruits.
People there are all very skinny. They're all fit because like your job is to work on a field. So like all day you're at the field cutting sugarcane, which is really hard. You have to reap them, and they're like essentially bamboo. And then you come home and you eat a bunch of dal puri and pumpkin, and you go to sleep.
I've heard of roti, but I don't know if it's probably not prepared the same way. I'm curious.
No, it's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they have it in like Trinidad too, and
maybe that's what I'm thinking. Yeah, the Trinidad roti.
Yeah.
I can tell you about the great disagreement between Trinidad and Guyana. So those two countries, it's very fun. Like growing up my entire time, the Trinidadian folks were frenemies. Like we're both Caribbean, we're both in the area, but we're so similar. It's like we're better than you. And the number one disagreement that we would always get is, do you call it chicken curry or curry chicken? And people will die on that debate if you bring it up between the Trinidad flag and Guyana flag. The Guyanese are on the chicken curry side, and the Trinidadians are on the curry chicken side.
Interesting. I did not know about that debate, but I am also on the curry
Jamaicans
chicken side. That's how I've
say curry chicken. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna leave this meeting right now.
Oh my! I think that maybe it's the Indian. I mean, obviously there are Indians in Trinidad and Jamaica as well, but I feel like there's so much more in Guyana. It's more of a percentage of the population in Guyana. Because I feel like in India too, it's chicken curry. Like it's not curry chicken.
I think so. Yeah.
So maybe that's the influence there.
I never got to the bottom of the debate. I took the chicken curry side because it's just fun. Pick teams, have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a very fun relationship we have with the Trinidadians because we're the same. Like they're so similar. The
Yeah,
cultures are
for
just
sure.
marginally different, but
Hmm.
we'll pick apart every difference to the nth degree, and it's just
Yes.
hilarious.
Did you have a lot of friends growing up from like other Caribbean countries and stuff?
Oh
And like you
yeah,
talked
all
about this kind
over.
of stuff with them? Yeah.
Yeah, all the time. Because like my classes in elementary school and middle school were, let's say there were 30 kids, maybe 15 of them were Guyanese, Trinidadian, or
Wow.
Surinamese. So
Wow.
everybody was from the
That's
Caribbean.
an awesome environment to go. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, that's so cool. Because even though there's a big Caribbean community in Miami, it's like I don't know, like there's not really like necessarily a conglomerate all in one place. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? It's like we're kind of just spread out. So I don't know. I never had that experience of like having a whole
Hmm.
bunch of kids in my school being from
Yeah,
the Caribbean. It
I
was
think
yeah.
it might be because of New York, because it's so hard to get real estate and spread yourself out. That in New York, you
Mm,
see all of these communities start forming. There's the Guyanese one. This is where the Jewish people live. This is where the Dominicans live. This is where the people from Honduras live. So you get all these little neighborhoods that might be 5 blocks, 6 blocks. Like Little Guyana might be maybe 9 square blocks for all the Guyanese people. So they're all going to the same schools. They're all going to the same places. We're
yeah.
going to the same businesses. So you run into them a lot.
And just to quickly kind of go back to visiting Guyana, do you still have not friends? Do you still have family there in
Yeah.
You can
Guyana?
have friends there too.
Or maybe
Yeah.
friends too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friends, I don't know. I was so young when I went. I didn't make any friends.
Yeah.
But my mom's parents are still there. So like they're the
Ah,
primary people we go and visit. And a lot of my
yeah.
mom's family, like her sisters and things, are still in Guyana. But like
Hmm.
they're usually who we go to visit. But my dad has migrated most of his family. Like there's not a lot of people left there. So anytime we want to visit them, they're either in Canada or the United States.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
We have a similar experience. Yeah.
do you find that your grandparents intentionally want to stay? Because like our grandparents were like, I'm gonna be born and die in Jamaica. Like they
Yeah,
refused.
that's why
They,
my mom's parents are there because
yeah.
they have the passes. They can come to the United States. They visit every
Yeah.
now and then, but they're just not happy here
Yeah.
because the lifestyle is so different. Like they have their own house, they have their own piece of property, they grow their fruits, they're getting a pension from Guyana, so they're really just
Hmm.
living their life in a tropical country. And I'm like, you know what? I don't blame you. It's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And when they come to New York, they're kind of just like sitting in a house, and like the winter's so brutal for them because they never did it before, and they just
Hmm.
didn't like it. They might have fun
Gotcha.
in Miami or Florida, but they've never experienced it.
Well, I just always remember my grandma saying one thing of like, she's like, I know the life is harder here in Jamaica, but it's my home. Like, it's what I know. And so I'm just curious if, like, I don't know, technically I'm
Yeah, I don't know if
discriminating.
that's their sentiment. Their sentiment's usually just like New York
It's like,
really sucks, and we really want to be here instead.
okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair
That's
enough.
funny. I think too, there's like such a great sense of community there in Jamaica that they had that we just don't have in the US. So I don't know if you noticed that, Kashan. Like, do you feel like there was more of a sense of community there in Guyana as well? That like,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Hmm.
People all know each other. So like if you lived in a village or town, every single person in that village or town knows everything about everybody else. You know if a kid is being born, you know if they're doing good in school or not, you know if someone's fruit tree is bearing, you got to go over and get some before everyone else does it. Like
Yeah.
everybody has a tap on everybody else. And that's really nice. Like when I was watching my grandparents walk around the neighborhood and people were saying hello and this and that and they were striking up conversations, I see why they want to stay there because everybody in the
Hmm.
entire town is just a friend, which is really nice. And I have never experienced that here, especially growing up in
Right.
New York. Like there's millions of people that you engage with every day, and they all feel like strangers. Even people I went to
Hmm.
class with, they felt like strangers, which is odd because like we're so packed on top of each other, but you don't connect in the same way.
Yeah. That's interesting to hear that the similarities because I found that to be true. To be like, yeah, your neighbor would be like, oh, how's Mrs. Young doing? This and that.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. And so it's crazy. I do love that sense of community over there.
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love being able to have fun with my neighbors, go to community
Hmm.
parties, cook for them is another great thing to do. But
Hmm.
it's just real tough here. I don't know. Maybe it's the culture. Maybe it's because people are so independent here. I have no idea, but it's hard to break that barrier, especially with neighbors and community and stuff like that.
So you kind of mentioned that your dad said the kind of typical like, oh, when I was growing up, I had to like do all this, and like our parents did similar things or said similar things. Do you have any like other funny stories about your parents kind of saying stereotypical immigrant parent things or doing stereotypical immigrant
Yeah,
parent?
I think the funniest things that they would do to me was they would just tell me lies to stop me from doing things. So one thing would be let's say that when we went to the stores, and you know how like they have the smart scanners that tell you like what the price of something is. You bring it over, you scan the barcode, and they just tell you, oh, this is $5, 2% off today. I would always, because I was a menace growing up. I don't blame them at all. I was destructive and annoying and all the things. But I would go around and I would just take my hands or things and just put them under the scanner and just take up space. And just stop people from, like, they'd be in a line behind me and I'm like scanning this thing, scanning that thing, trying to scan like an object on my phone or putting like a color under it to see how like the colors would change. So they would tell me, if you use those lasers, they would inject lead into your body. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want lead in my body. And then I immediately stopped. And there's a million little things that they would do that were exactly like that. And then when I got older, I realized, oh, they were BSing me the entire time.
Yes.
Our
that
parents
is so funny.
or at least my mom. Yeah. I feel like she told us.
The moms.
I don't know.
It was the moms. Another one is you can't point at tombstones or like graveyards because it's a disrespect. Do you guys have that too?
Mm-mm.
I don't know that one. No, that's interesting to me. Yeah.
That's one that I know the Guyanese have it for sure, and my wife also has it. She's Vietnamese, where you're not supposed to point at them. You're supposed to either like do the politician, like hey, like that thing, or you're supposed to acknowledge it without like pointing. And I don't know why it is, but it was so common across all of the different cultures that like whenever you see a graveyard, everyone's like, oh my God, don't even point your fingers in that direction. Just face the opposite way.
Interesting. I wonder if it's like a respect thing or something.
I
don't know.
I think it's a respect thing, but I don't know why. I have no idea.
Yeah, or some kind of like superstitious thing. Yeah, that's interesting.
There's plenty of superstitions. Like, there's so many. My dad is a Hindu and my mom is a Christian. So like there was the cultural difference between them. So the Hindu sides are the ones with the ridiculous superstitions. So my dad's dad was a Hindi equivalent of a pastor. So he was a community leader. He would do prayers for people, show up and bless the homes and things like that. But there's a thing that they would do when you're a baby, kind of like choosing the avatar, where you would take the baby, you would have a certain set of objects in front of them, and then they would have affinities towards each object. And depending on what they would pick with the pattern that shows up in their palm, plus the lengths of their earlobes, and what day it was, you would be able to predict their entire future just off of that one little thing. So every single kid has these readings, and mine was and they were also like reading a horoscope, so it would be so general, it's impossible for it to be wrong. But people would live and die by these things. So if someone told you like, oh, like you're gonna die one day from like a car, they don't drive anymore. They don't go on the street. I was like, oh, like beware of the color red. They don't wear red for the rest of their life. They're never gonna do it ever again. So that was the funnest part of that, was those crazy superstitions that would stick with people for their entire life.
Interesting.
Because like since Guyana is so depopulated, there's a very heavy influence of the native culture. So like people know more about Guyana for the native uncontacted people who were in South America before the emigration. That culture is very relevant. So there's a lot of superstition, shamanism. People travel there to do drugs all the time. That culture of shamanism is still there, and it bled into the Hinduism that's there. Because like we're also very disconnected from India. Like nobody has actual Indian relatives. They all are Guyanese. So they made their own version of Hinduism that has some of the shamanism, some Christianity, some just random stuff that they decided to start doing. So the Hinduism is parallel to the actual like Indian Hinduism and has a lot of superstition in it.
I find that so fascinating about the Caribbean and like all of the countries in the Caribbean. It's like, it's like this interesting blend of different cultures because like we said, there are Chinese people, Indian people, all these people that came over as like part of colonialism and the aftermath of slavery and all that. And it's so interesting how all those different cultures kind of blended together and created their own thing. So that's really fascinating.
Another fun cultural tidbit, and this is probably my favorite thing. It didn't come up initially, but now I'm remembering it.
Sure.
Every single person has a nickname. And that nickname will be used more than your actual name.
Yep.
So all of my relatives growing up, I only ever knew them by their nickname. So every now and then they'd be like, oh, like, did you check Harold's 401k statement? I'm like, Harold? Who the heck is that? They're like, oh, Uncle Chalk Dust. I'm like, oh, Chalk Dust, I know him.
Yeah.
And they call him Uncle Chalk Dust because he's dark-skinned and ashy.
Oh.
So when he was in school, he got the name Chalk Dust and it never left. And people who are of note, family members, his own parents, call him Chalk Dust. And I've only ever known him by that. But his real name is Harold.
Yes.
Whether you like your nickname or not, right? Like,
no, you just get it.
Sticks with you.
Get it
yeah.
and it's stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
same.
Did you ever get a nickname? I figured not. I guess maybe not because over there.
No, I
but
never got one. Yeah. My name was unique enough. Like Keshan is like a weird name in Guyanese culture. So it was unique enough that they just called me that. But like my dad's nickname is Lil Bai because he was the smallest of all his brothers. There's a dude named Steele because he would just take things from people. Like he would just steal things from people. So they called him Steele. Oh, watch out, Steele's coming. And like, but it's a community, so you have to be friends with them still. So everyone just gets their own thing, and it's man, like that's my favorite part of the culture is the hilarious nicknames.
I mean, it's the same in Jamaica too. Like we have, people have nicknames that they get from when they're like born or just like very little, and it's just like you said, it's just their name for the rest of their life, and people don't remember their real name until they like are at their funeral or something. Like it's like I've asked my mom like, oh, what's like Fitzy's real name, and she's like, me don't know. She like has like it's like people like in your own family like don't even know their real name.
It's insane.
Yeah, you don't. I don't know, like, because I made the mistake one time of like calling my mom at work and calling her by her nickname. Just I don't know why, and she got so mad at me because she was like, nobody at work knows me under that. Like she's like, don't call me. So I won't even say it on here because she probably will get mad. but like, yeah. So
I feel like that's a common cultural thread though, because like my best friend is from Bangladesh. And they also have the same thing. They have a home name and then they have the actual name. So like his actual name is Imran, but his home name is Shagor. But you only ever use that if you're around family or people of the culture. Because I've only ever known him as Imran. Because like I'm not Bangladeshi, I'm not Muslim. So like I never was introduced to him in that way. But it's like a parallel thing to the Caribbean culture and Jamaican culture as well.
And so how does that like kind of being in Queens and having that proximity to a lot of Guyanese people, and then sounds like you visited a few times. Like, how would you identify yourself as like just Guyanese American, or like, do you feel really tied to your culture, or like?
No, I feel very loosely tied. My parents never really imparted culture onto us. So they really, cause like we come from a household where there were like two religions to start off with. And even in Guyana, those are way different tracks. Like if you were a Christian who spoke good English versus like a Hindu servant, like your life paths were way different. So when our parents were raising us, they always just said, it's up to you. Like, we'll tell you about stuff. We'll tell you stories. We'll introduce you to the religions and the culture. But it's up to your choice of what you want to do. And like for a long time, like I wasn't religious. For a long time, I didn't identify as Guyanese. So I didn't really develop that thread to it, which I should have done more. Like it is where I come from, but not a strong connection to it at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess that's an interesting dynamic too with the different religion differences. Yeah.
Because like if you were a Christian, you had priority placement in schools and jobs and things like that. So you just tended to have gaps in wealth. So like my mom's family was far wealthier than my dad's family, but they ended up together anyway. So like when they came over, they didn't want to repeat that because like you could feel the prejudice. And my dad talks about it a lot because my mom's more like, oh, I don't know what he's talking about because she was on the positive side of it. But my dad was like, no, like there were very high hurdles that you had to jump through if you were the wrong religion or the wrong skin color or the wrong even association. Like you went to the wrong school. Like you went to not a British school, derived school, but you went to like a native school. Like that was a big deal.
Like has your relationship with like whether you identify as Guyanese American or how closely tied you feel to Guyana, has that changed at all over time? Like, have you found as you got older that you were like, oh, I'm more interested in knowing more or in being...
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah. As I got older, I just became interested in different cultures. And then me being from one where I had access to the people and the community and all that kind of stuff just made me want to learn more about it. So that's where the interest came from. I don't know if I identify any more as Guyanese. Like when I introduce myself, I never mention my ethnicity or anything like that. Only if people ask, then I bring it up. And even when they do, I'm like, oh, like I'm American, but my parents are Guyanese. Because like I can't really represent the culture, so I don't like saying that I am part of the culture. So like that's usually how I navigate it. But I am learning a lot more, especially from my dad as he's getting older. So that's been my thing.
I would say this, I kind of say the same thing if people ask me. I'm like, yeah, my parents are Jamaican. Because, we grew up here. And people ask me, like, how come you don't have an accent? And I'm like, I mean, I grew up here. Like, I can understand the Jamaican patois, but I don't, don't speak it. So, and how I actually found out Keshan was even Guyanese. I think you saw my Jamaican flag
Oh,
in the
yeah, I
background
did.
our one of our meetings. And so then that kind of prompted me to be like, hey, yeah.
Yeah,
And
because it's so
so
rare for me to find other people. I'm like, oh, I found you.
yeah.
Like, there's another one.
Right. That's funny.
Well, I have a bit of a like random question because, like I said, I like to kind of do some light research. I don't want to know too much. I like to learn from the guests. So, but I did some light research of Guyana, and I found out that very recently, or like a few years ago, they found like oil nearby Guyana or something like that, and so Guyana is kind of gearing up to become quite a bit richer pretty
Oh, yeah.
soon, and they have like a whole deal with Exxon Mobil, I think it is, and all of this stuff. So I guess my question was, have you heard about this? And like, I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
if you have any thoughts about how this
Yeah.
might change the country and all of that.
This has been the thing that people have been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years at this point. And every time I go back home, my dad is constantly watching Guyana news, which is people on YouTube, and that's the only thing they're talking about is this Exxon deal. I don't know how well it's gonna go. The position that the government took is that they want to kind of socialize it. So it is a deal with Exxon, but the money goes into the Guyanese government and they're going to spend that on the community. So they're touting like higher pensions and this and that, and whatever party's in power is going to want to use the money to stay in power. And I don't know if it's a good thing. I'm afraid, knowing my people, that they would fall into the Dutch disease trap where the whole economy just becomes about oil and then you forget all the other things. Because like Guyana, they export bauxite and timber and they do mining and gold and things like that.
Hmm.
That's all gonna go away once oil like covers everything because no one lives there. Like there's not enough people to manage every industry. So I'm afraid that it turns into Dutch oil disease. I'm happy that they have a lot of the money coming in. I don't think they're going to spend the money well.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's, just
Yeah.
in other cases that we've seen, obviously, with like Venezuela, even Russia, and like all these other countries that are so rich in oil. Yeah, all these other issues pop up and it's just corrupts the government sometimes. It
Yeah,
corrupts.
that's a big thing because in Guyana there's a lot of strife between the ethnic classes. So the vast majority of the population is African, and they have their
Mm.
own like Caribbean African culture. And then there are the West Indians that are maybe 10 or 20% of the population, and they vie for political power in very violent ways. So like there were periods of time where there was like assassinations and things going on. There's periods of times where they would target ethnic groups for specific like removal from political office or like bar them from going to schools and things like that. So that area is really heated, and now you just throw oil into it. So now all of that is raised to times 10. And like that's what's happening right now. So people are sorting out who gets the money, who gets the rights to the land, who gets to negotiate with Exxon, who gets to spend the money. So I would say in the short term, it's more conflict, more like hate is being generated between the groups. I'm hoping that they get over it because, like, they've been living there for 200 years. So hopefully you guys figure out how to find love in
Yeah.
that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, just one other quick note too that from like what I was reading and seeing is that Guyana is on the coast, or at least part of it is on the coast, and it's like it's also an environmental issue as well, with like obviously with oil causing a lot of issues with the environment, and Guyana being heavily affected by more so than a lot of other inland countries by environmental factors. Are you also kind of looking against your own interests? So yeah, a lot there.
I don't think people are considering that though, because like in Guyana, they're so poor that whether or not the coastline floods a bit more is like, whatever, I'll move my stilt house like 10 feet back, whatever. So people aren't concerned about that. They're mostly just concerned about like, is this gonna mean that I can't send my kids to schools anymore because the wrong
Mm.
people are in power? Is this like, are all the sugarcane farms gonna go down because like that's where my pension comes from? Like those are the concerns that people have. And then also like, hey, like I heard you guys are gonna do a new basic income. Like, can I get some?
Yeah.
Like that's another factor of it.
So when you go abroad and like visit your family members, do they make fun of your Americanness or do they embrace you
Oh
as
yeah,
Guyanese? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's something.
Because like I am probably the most integrated into American culture. Like me and my sister are. So when we go back, we're getting the hit of like the accents, the people, the this and that, and
Yeah.
even like my own cousins and family members, they're a lot less. I'm using the word integrated, but like they still have their accent, they still know the culture, they still do all these things. So when I go back, I feel like a stranger. Like I also
Hmm.
don't look very Guyanese. I look a lot different than a lot of other people in Guyana because I'm very light skinned. My
Hmm.
sister isn't. So like
Okay.
I look different, I talk completely different. I have
Yeah.
the American white collar business accent. So when they hear that, they go, "Oh, look, the big shot is coming." So I get that a
Yeah.
lot. But yeah, there's a huge difference in the way I get treated because I just feel like a stranger to the culture.
And that's kind of why we're like started this podcast, because it's like you don't fit in over there, like in your parents' country, but then sometimes in the U.S. you can feel like you're people don't always see you as
Oh
like
yeah.
okay, but like what are you? You know, so usually that's where we kind of the name comes from, culture in between. It's like you're in this in
Yeah.
between limbo state where
I think
I
that's
don't know.
probably where I got a lot of my independence from. So like I like politically I lean very libertarian because I'm like just do it yourself. It's always your fault. Like you can solve this. But it's because I never fit into any community. Like in the Guyanese community, I was always the strangest one. And then in all of the other cultures,
Mm.
I'm Guyanese, which is the strangest thing. So there's no way for you to fit into anything. And I
Yeah.
just kind of went, well, you know what? I'm on my own then. So that's probably where I developed that need to be completely independent no matter what.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good way. That's what I kind of had to learn to be, because like when I used to get asked, what are you? Where are you from? And I used to like not understand why people would ask me this question. And I realized, oh, okay, it's because of how you look and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. And so it's like
Oh, that's a
you
good
just gotta
point.
yeah. And so
I
it's like
never
just
knew why people would ask me that. Yeah, I remember thinking as a kid, they're like, "Oh, like where are you from?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Queens." They're like, "No, no, no, where are
right.
your parents from?" I'm like, "Oh, Little
Yeah.
Guyana. Why do you care about my parents? You're talking to me." Like,
Right. Yeah, it used to bother me a lot when people asked me that initially, but now they're just curious. Like I just realized that, and so and I think I don't know, like when you're from I think a family or a background that like say like Chinese Jamaican, all these Indian Jamaicans, all these kind of things, like so hearing you talk about all these things, like oh okay, cool, cool, cool. But like for people who maybe aren't around that, it's a little bit different, I guess. So people are just I think are just curious, and so I've just learned to embrace it and know like okay, this is what I am, because people are just gonna base you off of like what they think you look like or what they can relate you to. And so, yeah. So
I
I
had a
get you with that.
question that I'm
Sure.
thinking about the whole time. What does the food look like for Chinese Jamaican? Like, what is that food?
So we have like a few restaurants here near where we grew up in Miami that are like Chinese Jamaican restaurants. But they don't really fuse the two like cuisines. They kind of just like they serve Chinese food and they serve Jamaican food. Like it's like they just served both of
Mhm.
them. I will say like the Chinese food that they serve tends to be more like I don't know how to describe it. Like I don't know. It tends to kind of have like more like I guess a Jamaican flavoring to
Yeah.
it.
I'm imagining like Chinese food with like jerk sauce. Like that sounds fire.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
they don't really like fuse it, but they do kind of make like the Chinese food with Jamaican ingredients. I feel like because I was like I always get this fried rice from this Jamaican Chinese restaurant that we go to, and it's definitely darker and like has more of a kick to it than like regular fried rice you would get from a normal Chinese store. I feel like so yeah, so it's like it's definitely like around like but they tend to just kind of serve Chinese food and serve Jamaican food and like they don't really fuse them
Mhm.
together, which is kind of sad. I wish they would
Yeah,
actually.
the reason I was so curious is when my wife and I were dating, my parents had no idea. So like I don't share a lot with my family, so like they really have no idea what's happening with me. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I go, "Hey, I have a girlfriend. We've been dating for 2 years, and I want you to meet her." And they go, "Okay," and they're expecting like, okay, maybe it's a Hispanic girl, maybe it's
Mm.
a Guyanese person, maybe it's an Indian because like I was connected very deeply in like the Bank of America tech area. So like I'm very open. When I moved to Jersey, there was lots of Indians around me, so like maybe it's an Indian, and they were completely fine with all of that. And
Uh-huh.
when I brought her over, she was Vietnamese. And the first thing my mom did was like, "Oh, okay." Like she's Vietnamese. She pulls me aside and she leans in really close and goes, "What does she eat?" And she had no idea, like
Mm.
zero idea what Vietnamese food was. So I was really curious, like since you guys are Chinese
Mhm.
and Jamaican, how did the food come together? Because like they are not
Yeah.
compatible in Guyana.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But they are kind of done separately, and we're like a few generations back with the
Yeah.
Chinese Jamaican, and I think the Chinese came over as indentured servants. And so yeah, I'm not sure actually how much that kind of melded. That's a good question. I should ask my. I don't know. I feel like I should know that better, to be honest
Yeah,
with you.
that's a,
Yeah,
you've
like
given us food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
one
No fun.
one interesting place, which is actually my favorite dessert, where
Mhm.
Asian and Guyanese or West Indian culture mixed together. There
Mhm.
is a red bean cake, kind of like a moon cake, that we
Mhm.
call Chinese cake, which is not a
Mhm.
very nice term to use, but it's what we call
I
it.
get
It's
you.
like this big, it's yellow, it has a red dot on the top, and it's just red bean paste, and it's so delicious. But it came from Chinese culture. But it's such a staple in Guyanese households that it's the thing you buy first when you go to a pastry shop, and then other things. So like that was one where it blended really well.
Interesting. Yeah, you even bringing up the name of the thing, like it's funny because you're saying, yeah, it's not really like PC. I noticed that like they're, at least in Jamaican culture, they're very like, they would just call it like they call people like Chinese man and all that, and like they call you
Chinaman like that, yeah.
yeah. So that's like, but it's not an offensive thing. Whereas like
Yeah.
maybe in the U.S. it might seem like, but it's like
Yeah.
but it's not meant to like have any
No,
malice
they're like
behind
terms
it.
of endearment. Like
Yeah.
there's a close family member. His name is Blackie because he's the darkest guy that they know. My grandfather on my mom's side, his name is Whitey because his mom was from Portugal. So like they don't care. They're like, it is what it is. He's Whitey. I love him. Like,
I love the
Yeah.
literalness behind
Yeah.
it. Yeah. You guys don't eat oxtail or anything by any chance, do you? Or is that a big?
no.
No?
It's available, but it's just something
Yeah.
that the West Indians don't eat.
Okay.
Because like,
Okay.
the Hinduism and the cow, like you're not allowed to eat beef at all. So like that's a one that was taken out.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Oxtail is Alyssa's favorite
I know.
in food.
So,
So,
I just was curious. The
Yeah, I
Jamaican
try to
patties
get
are good,
like tail, tongue, hoof, brain, heart. Like whenever I go to exotic restaurants, I want the exotic meat. So like I try to get those wherever I go. So
Ah.
next time I'm at a spot, I'm gonna get oxtail.
too. Yes, that or curry goat is those
Oh,
are really
yeah.
good. We don't eat
Yeah.
a lot of goat here in the U.S. for some reason, but it's good.
Yeah,
I don't
you have to
I
know
like
how to cook it because like to make
Yeah.
goat curry, you have to
That's right. Yes.
you have to cook it for hours, like hours and hours and hours, and you're just boiling it in curry the whole
Yes.
time. And like people don't have time for that, so they don't make it.
Yeah. And the curry, I don't know if, I guess I'm curious because you guys have an Indian influence, but our curry is more like it's like a yellowish, I don't know how to describe it, less, kind of a different type of curry, I feel like, than maybe
Yeah,
traditional Indian
it's
curry.
definitely not as thick. So like the curry is very thing inside of it oriented. So whether it's I don't know what the names in like English terms are, but there's things
Yeah.
called like duff or chickpeas or chana or whatever you want to call it. That's the prime thing you're eating in the curry, and then the sauce, the curry liquid around it, is so much thinner than like Indian curry. And yeah, I don't know. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
It's also darker and it's
Yeah.
not spicy. So like people think of
Right,
curry, they think
exactly.
of like blow your brains out spiciness.
It's not spicy.
But because Guyana is tropical, you can't grow exotic spices there, so there's just not a lot available. So they're just not spicy.
And does Guyana have like a dialect? Because we, Jamaican patois, like, do you have a name for the language or
No,
something?
I don't think there is
okay.
a name for the language.
okay.
We just call it the Guyanese accent, or we call it
Okay,
Caribbean,
okay.
or whatever we call it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds similar to patois. But if you're a careful listener, you can notice the differences.
Yeah, and technically, I mean, I don't know. There's been a debate on like, is patois a language or not? I say no. I think it's a dialect, but
Yeah, I
some
think
people would argue.
because like you use the same words as English, but
Yes,
it's just used
exactly.
with different context.
Yes, for sure. You want to get into the fun questions, Bree?
Yeah, and just like a little comment on that. Yeah, I agree too about the language. I like feel very strongly about this because I don't know, it like bothers me when people are like, "Oh, it's a language." Like, no. And we do have certain words, like there are different words. Like there are certain words that they say that obviously are not like used anywhere else, but yeah, it's not a difference.
Yeah, one
more
that
like-
comes to mind immediately is like "bye," like to say boy or gal for girl. Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
spelled
Yeah.
differently, it's said differently. There's like also like all the family member like names and things like that. The way you reference them, it's not words that are words in English, but they
Right.
mean the same thing and they sound similar.
Or they just like phrase words differently, like I don't know. For patois is like they don't say the sound; they say like past the T.
Yeah, they also
or the
Yeah.
like or they say me a lot instead of like I did this like
Yes,
you know
yeah,
you know what I
same,
mean. That
yeah.
kind of stuff is so that's where the little nuances are.
Yeah,
Awesome,
or
that's
like
cool.
spread the bed instead of make the bed, which I
Yeah,
still
certain little
can't.
phrases. There's things I've learned
Or
when I
cut
went to
the
college.
lights, like cut the lights
Yeah.
off.
Ah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's things my husband has pointed out. He's like, "You mean make the bed?" I was like, "What?" I said, "My mom always said spread." He's like, "You spread stuff on a sandwich." I was like, "I don't know. This is just what I've.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think about
Yeah.
it. So yeah, certain things.
There are also parts of the language that I didn't realize how deep the accent went. So like one thing that took me forever to get over is saying three. because I say tree every time.
Tree,
Like every now
yeah.
and then you'll hear me in some of our meetings where I'll say tree or this or or that, and like I'm dropping a lot of the H's, and
Yeah.
it's subconscious. Another thing I couldn't get was calendar, because the way you say it is calendar. Like you're like, oh, go mark the calendar, and like you drop so many syllables that every now and then it just comes out. I'm like, oh man, it just slipped out. There you go.
Yeah. My word is, I don't know if you do this too, Alyssa, like condensed. I can't say condensed. It's like always like condensed milk. Like, yeah.
Oh yes,
Yes.
condensed. They do the
Yeah.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I said that wrong for so many years. But you don't realize it's wrong, I guess, until somebody like points it out.
Yeah, and nobody ever points it out because you're either talking to someone who's making the same mistake, or they're being nice and they're like, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. But like when you don't have an accent, at least I've had friends call me out, but my mom says that no one's gonna say anything. But like it's like, why did you pronounce it like that? So yeah, I totally get it. That's funny. It's cool to see the similarities between the two.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So let's go to the fun questions now. And we already talked quite a bit about food, so that's usually one of our fun questions. But we've already kind of covered that.
Food guy, man.
Yeah, we've covered that topic, which is great. So my first question for the fun part, and this has been a little bit controversial. Some people have not been able to really come up with a great answer for it, but I still love this question, and I want to know: do you happen to have like a favorite Guyanese expression or like saying?
One that I like is called vexed. Like when they say like
Yes.
like she is vexed.
Vexed.
Like that means that the person is not smitten with you. Like they're upset with you, but they still want to engage with you, but they're upset. She's vexed. Like that was one that is so good because it describes something that I don't have a parallel for in English.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
that's awesome.
I do like that. That's a good one.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
use that too. Yeah. That is a great word.
The Sean Paul song is
Right.
is popping in my head right
Yeah.
now. What is it?
Don't vex with me. Da, da, da,
Yeah, that one. There you go.
Yeah.
And most people don't know what he's saying in the song,
Right.
But like, yeah, but
Oh, that was
the
another
best.
strange thing. Like I know what Sean Paul's saying. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's when you know like what Sean Paul is saying, or like Rihanna actually, like in Barbados, it's not like Jamaica and I think like Guyana, like they don't actually really have like, they have an accent but not like a dialect really, like they don't have the same like words like how we do in Jamaica and stuff. But Rihanna will like do like sing things in patois sometimes. So like her song Work, people are always like, I don't understand anything in that song, and I'm like, I actually understand like most of it. Like yeah.
Well, when you bring up work as an example, that didn't even register because I'm like, that's such an easy song to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but everyone, like I remember when it came out and I was with some friends, they're like I only understand Work. I don't know, but I love the song. Yeah. They were like, I just love this
Yeah, so
song,
I
but I
guess
don't understand anything she's saying.
I guess the things like that you take for granted because it's just you're not even thinking about processing. It's just like, okay, I understand what she's saying.
Good. I love that. So can you tell us now, do you have a happy place in Guyana when you visit, like a place that you really enjoy or makes you feel good when you go there?
Oh yeah, it's definitely my grandparents' house because like they live in the country. The whole thing's a country, but like they live in the outback area
countryside.
where you need to go on a dirt road through trees and stuff. But then they have this outcropping that's a town. So you have a cutout in the middle of the jungle that's where they live, and it's just like farms and plants and things like that. You can walk around the neighborhood. There's not a lot of traffic. Everybody knows each other. It's just the opposite of what it is here, and it's so calming to be there because like everybody's slower, they talk calmer, there's no struggles or existential like, oh my god, if we don't deliver this tomorrow, X company is gonna it's all just like chill, just like calm down, you'll be fine. Like it's very, very nice. So that's my happy place there.
All right. And is there anything that you do or have done in Guyana that you wouldn't do in the US?
I wouldn't say so. Like there's nothing there that you can get or need to get done that doesn't get done here. Like even the West Indians, when they get saris created, like they get them imported for either from India or from New Jersey, which is like the best place to get saris if you didn't know that. The mecca of creating saris, besides India, is New Jersey. Because it's specifically New Brunswick, New Jersey, because that for some reason is where all of the Indians are. They just took over that town, and they have like traditional shops that source from India, and people from New York, people from Pennsylvania, people from Florida, they make special requests to that location to get their stuff done.
All right. Okay. So to wrap up, I just like to ask, about maybe something you sort of dislike and then something that you absolutely love about your parents' culture.
The thing that I dislike the most is that they are willing to lie to save face. So like if there's a family problem going on and things are
Mhm.
happening, and then someone goes like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you guys doing good?" It'll immediately be like, "It's a lie." And then when I would go, "Hey, like why are we lying to people?" They're like, "You never let people know things are wrong." And like I just don't like that at all because like it's
Yeah.
not the way I live my life personally. So like that's a part of the culture where you have to keep secrets, you have to save face, you have to look
Yes.
proper. I hate that so much.
Gotcha. That's funny. Yeah, but impressions or having a certain impression or persona to people, I think is very
Yes.
important. I get
Yeah,
that.
that's
Yeah, I
super,
understand
super
that.
important.
Hmm.
Something I love. I love the comedy that happens. So people are very open to just harshly joking at each other, like really, really, really going at each other. But it's all in jest and it's all in good fun. So that was actually a conflict that I had with my wife when we first got married. As she was getting introduced into the culture, she didn't realize that we shit talk. I don't know if I can curse, but like
Yes, you're good.
yeah, we shit talk the heck out of each other insanely. And I never noticed how bad it was until she had to pull me aside one day and be like, "Hey, why are your parents so mean to me? And like, why are you being mean to me?" I'm like, "Oh, we're not being mean. We're joking with you because we love you." And she's like, "It doesn't come across as that." But when
Yeah.
you're in the culture, like it's just
Yep.
negging on each other over and over again. It's just so fun. I love doing it. And like all my friends did it growing up. My family members did. When I call my grandma, she shit talks the shit out of me. And like it's great. I love it. Like that's my favorite part because it's brutally honest. You can be truthful with somebody, and that's why it's
Yeah.
funny and like it's so
Yes.
great. And that's my favorite part.
I will say I do appreciate Caribbeans like brutal honesty. Like
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
little bit sensitive, but like where that you stand with them, which is
Oh yeah.
there's some novelty to that, and like and like they just they if they I shared breathe a video, the Julie Mango video with Keshan actually one time, and where the mom is just like berating the girl like, "Oh, you put on weight, all these things," and it's like. It's just they just speak their mind. Like if they think
Yeah.
you got fat, or they think
Oh
where's
yeah.
if they're not happy with you, like where's your boyfriend or where's your significant other, like they'll just
Oh yeah.
call you out on it. So
They'll
yeah,
call
I
you out.
understand.
They'll call you out. And I love the honesty, especially when it comes to
Yeah.
weight. That's always a concern. Did you
Yep.
like, oh, you got fat, or like, oh, you got really skinny. Maybe you should eat. Like it's never
Right.
satisfied, no matter what you
No.
do. And then the spouse, like, where's the girl? Where's the guy? What are they
Yeah.
doing? Have you brought them? Why didn't you introduce me? Like all those things, because like they want to
For sure.
expand the family. Like that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
So that's why they're so
For sure.
apt to it.
Yeah, they definitely have expectations, and they're not afraid to let you know
Yeah.
when you don't meet them. So yeah.
Oh,
For sure.
I know we're almost at time,
No, you're
but
good. You're fine.
when we went back to New York, maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I brought my wife to a Guyanese wedding in the middle of Little Guyana. And
Oh, cool.
just the seeing her take it all in. So there are a couple like notable events that she pointed out. One was two guys came up to the bride and groom and like gave them a card. Like, you give them a card, has a thing in it, and the money's inside, and like that's your gift to them. But they were wearing t-shirts. And she goes, "Why are those guys wearing Ed Hardy t-shirts?" And then my sister looks over and goes, "Those are their best t-shirts." And she wasn't lying. There's so little need to have a suit. There's so little need to have dress clothes, all this and that. They just don't have it. So when it's time to go to this wedding, they were the only ones wearing t-shirts. So like, you know what? This is my favorite t-shirt. I'm gonna wear that one. And like that's what they wore. Everybody was blinged out, top to bottom. Like you would see 3 rings on each finger. Like all the old Guyanese men wore every ounce of jewelry that they had to show up. That was hilarious. It's like I was at like a BET award or something. Everyone's blinged out like crazy. The food was also really interesting. Like she went over and it's like all duck curry and dal puri and like everything that you could possibly imagine. And she was like, "All right, this is the best part." She was eating that the whole time.
Yeah.
And just watching her react to the culture, it was a continuous face of shock and awe, which was great.
That's awesome. We're gonna wrap up, but actually, you made me think of something. Has your wife assimilated very well in the Guyanese culture, and has your family been very welcoming?
Yes and no. So
Yes and no? Okay.
she has not assimilated at all. So like she doesn't get the culture. She
Yeah,
kind of understands it. She tries her best to participate in it, but it's just so different from what she's used to. The only thing she vibes on with my parents is the immigrant experience of like the crazy family members and the drama and the da da da. But the culture itself is not meshing. And it's probably a symptom of like the Asian food doesn't mix with the Guyanese food. That probably extends to the culture, so that's where she's struggling. And my dad was super welcoming. Like, he doesn't care. He's old as heck. He had me when he was like 40 or something. So he's at a point where like anything that happens, it doesn't matter. And my mom was not as welcoming because like in the culture, your son is so important in Guyanese culture that me going and marrying somebody now who is not Guyanese was not good. So me having a Vietnamese spouse was a big problem, and they recently got over it. But for a good year, they were not on good terms, and like that was the no in that yes and no answer.
Yeah. I hope you don't mind me asking. I hope that's not too personal. I was just curious.
My mom literally asked the question like, "What does she eat?" It was such a different culture that she didn't know what she ate. I'm like, food. She eats food. Like, like whatever you have, she'll eat it. Like, it's not that big a deal.
Thank you so much to Keshan for taking the time to interview with us today. It was so interesting to hear about how his Guyanese culture relates so much to the Jamaican culture that Brianna and I are so familiar with. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in for another episode. As a new podcast, we would really appreciate it if you left us a review on your podcast directory of choice, as it helps us spread the word and share the stories of our guests. Thanks for tuning in, and catch you next time.